I think it should be obviously taxed to a significantly higher extent. I think when you've got a business which is making huge profits because of innovation and they're providing a new service to customers which they didn't have before, they're creating real value in the market, good luck to them. But what we have here is a business which is benefiting, and I'm not attacking Shell for that, that's just what's happened in the last 12 months. They're benefiting from a geopolitical cataclysm, which is the war in Ukraine, and which is having a really negative impact for the UK energy consumer. And I think it's a perfectly sensible thing to say, well, while this is happening, let's increase the tax on these unprecedented profits you've got. I mean, these are really high profits. I believe they are the third highest profits that are set to be posted by a UK business, so after British American Tobacco and Vodafone. So
yeah, and just to be clear, everyone, of course, these are global profits. These are not profits that are made just in the UK. Let me ask you one quick point there, because you say when the profits are going up because of a geopolitical catastrophe that's outside of their control, we should increase the tax on them. Do you support the reverse argument then? So when their profits are in free fall, perhaps even in losses in some cases, because of geopolitical catastrophes outside of their control, would you agree then to give them more money as a bolster to them?
I don't think we need to have a general rule. I think it's quite a sensible thing to say, this is an energy company, people are paying more for their energy, they're making significant profits.
Yeah.
I think they should be able to help out the energy consumer in this country because it's driving millions of people into penury. So I don't think we need to have a general rule. Like I say, if, for instance, you have a business making tens of billions of pounds of profit because of a new product which is adding value to people's lives, good for them. I think this is very different.
Last question before I bring in Alex in. 75% is the tax rate currently. What would you want it to go up to then?
Just push it up.
To what?
Well, no, push it up. I'm not. I don't know what. I'm not the tax and spend person at Whitehall or doing the shadow cabinet sums. But I think, as a principle of fairness, I think if they have higher profits than were being anticipated, say, 6 months ago, and these policies were being sort of percolated through into Downing Street, it should clearly be higher. I think it seems like a sensible thing to do.
Higher than 75%, so Alex?
My fear would be that once you start going north of 75, businesses start thinking about re-domiciling. And look, Conservatives aren't opposed necessarily to windfall taxes, and we've had them in the past under Tory government. So, and I accept that I mean, God, I bet they wish they hadn't handed down their results today, just as the bank puts up interest rates and so forth. Pragmatically, you can't help but think they're going to contribute more than they did before. And I just think, if they were smart, they'd have started making, 9-figure voluntary payments in to try and help the country. But if you start making rules that say you've got to pay north of 75% of your profit, businesses like this will start making decisions. Not least, bear in mind, until recently, this was a company that was dual listed between the Netherlands and the UK. And when forced to choose, which is not an outcome that the EU was ever expecting or wanted to encourage, they chose to single list in the UK because it was seen by them as a more favourable business environment. If we start being a less favourable business environment, you'll find out that, for argument's sake, you're 80% that you push it up to. 80% of nothing isn't very much, whereas 75% of a great deal is worth having. So that's the concern that I have. And I just want to make one more point about this industry. They really do innovate. You may not like the things they innovate in. Fracking was an innovation. People spent a lot of money on the fracking technique before they were able to deliver it. Some of the fields in the North Sea were declared basically dead. They were economically inactive. And businesses spent hundreds of millions of pounds exploring them and going deeper and finding out what you could extract there before they became economically viable again. Many environmentalists hate all this, but the idea that those companies don't innovate is completely...
I didn't say that. I said the base of this profitability is geopolitics. It's not because they've created some new innovation.
I accept that premise, yeah.
But we still haven't got to nuts and bolts of it because we're saying 75%. So just to be clear, in this country, normal corporation tax is about the 19% mark as it stands at the moment. So the oil companies, they get a 30% corp tax plus a 10% supplementary charge plus this 35% so-called wind tax, as we're referring to it. So 75% they're paying versus there or thereabouts 20% for other businesses. And I just want to push you on this whole concept, Aaron, because there's so many pension funds that are invested in these energy companies. I think in 2021, there was a calculation done that showed that it was about £2,000 for every person in the UK was invested in these energy companies. And when you put your pensions into these organisations, it's in the interest of the growth of those funds, all of our pensions, that these companies are making as much profit, are paying as many dividends as possible. So wouldn't you be worried if you're damaging their profitability that you're effectively damaging the pension funds of everyone?
So I think the pensions argument, I think, is overstated. So I think the relationship between pensions and UK-based pensions and the FTSE, I think, is often overstated, but it exists. I'll admit that.
Well, 2021, I grant you that's not, it's not yesterday, but 2021's not that long ago, and it was average £2,000 per person.
But in terms of the people who are exposed to what goes up and down in the FTSE, pension funds are actually a much smaller slither than we often believe. In terms of the what I would do with that, actually, going back to that, you walk down the high street, wherever your viewers are, and they might be in Carlisle or Bournemouth or Aberystwyth, walk down the high street, go into a business, say, what can the government do to help you? I think most of them would say, you know what, people just haven't got enough money to spend right now. Cut to VAT. A bit like we have in 2008-9 with the Gordon Brown government. Cut it by 5%, just for 6 months a year. I think increasing a windfall tax to pay for something like that would be fantastic for the UK economy, fantastic for blue-collar Brits who watch this show. It would really help them. And I think we go off into abstraction about, well, should profits be taxed this much and so on. Shell are printing money right now. Lots of people are struggling, and the cause for both is the same, the war in Ukraine. So I think it's a sensible policy. I'm not saying as a general rule we should, tax them till the pips squeak. I'm not saying that. I could say that because I'm a socialist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in this particular incident, with regards to energy, with the war in Ukraine, I think it's sensible to be able to pay for tax cuts elsewhere to help stimulate the economy at the expense of Shell.
The reason that people on the left won't put a number on it, certainly I watched your package with interest, and Ed Miliband, who's proposing the policy, didn't put a number on it. There's much more responsibility on him than put on Aaron on the panel today to actually say how much it would be, right? And Ed Miliband wouldn't say how much it was going to be. The reason they don't is that once they start saying that, you then work out the delta that between what they currently pay and what Labour says they're going to gain, as opposed to the risk of these companies saying, right, actually, a Labour government would be terrible for business, and we've got to get off this. These companies are actually always politically risk-averse, and they don't like getting involved in scraps with parties. But if they think to themselves, if this carries on and the Labour Party gets in, we can't be listed in the UK anymore, that's the kind of oppositional conversation Miliband would trigger if he starts putting a number on it. If you think about it, you're trying to have your cake and eat it. If you say, I want this policy, but I won't tell you how much it is, it's quite cowardly by the Labour Party to say, we will put it up. It's going to be a proper tax. Won't tell you how much, just in case it riles them and they start doing some economics on it, but I'd put it up.
Yeah, I just think once you start getting over, I mean, if you think about yourself, once you start, you're paying 75% of your earnings, you think, where is the incentive? And I know I'm breaking it down to an individual level.
Printing money, 40 billion.
Yeah, but then, yeah, I know,
a lot of it's going to go in tax, right?
Yeah, and also, by the way, Shell wasn't losing money, but it was certainly, during the pandemic, if you actually look at what they were declaring as profits, it was minuscule compared to where they currently are. And if you was a shareholder in Shell as well, I think for the first time in a very long time, you had your dividends cut as well. And I could hear the tiny little violins bleeding and playing